one thing I want to make clear, that before I left the Caribbean, I had in my possession all the gramophone records of Beethoven, Mozart and Bach that had been published. We imported them. I didn't come to Britain and learn about, not at all. There was a group of us. There was a man called Carlton Common, who used to be in charge of the library. He and his family, but he in particular, a most gifted musician. A most gifted musician. And we imported, and he used to be at the library and draw books and magazines. Then there was another man, I think he's still alive, very friendly, a man called Mendel.
Alfred Mendel?
Alfred Mendel, poet, writer. But in addition to poetry and writing, we were interested in classical music. So it was part of our circle. We formed a body of people in Trinidad and with friends in different parts of the Caribbean who were interested not only in literature, but in classical music.
I have a poem to James in Loving the Skin I'm In. James has been very seminal to my own growth and the evolution of my ideology. Straight away to Black Jacobins. I was very involved in the 1970 Black Power Revolution, and it always worried me why, although we were able to radically transform the society in a lot of fundamental ways, the effects were not lasting, and there were a lot of things with which I was not happy. So I was always reading and searching to find the answers. And one day I was rereading James's Black Jacobins, and it hit me in that chapter where he says, voodoo was the medium of conspiracy. And it seemed to me to jump out at me, and I said, but that is it. The reason why the revolution failed is that we did not root it in an African spirituality, an African worldview. It jumped out at me, and in that part where he talks about Bookman at Le Cap, you know, when he got all the people together, and he says, the God of the white man encourages him to crime, but my God encourages me to seek revenge. You know, that famous prayer. It summed up to me the difference in worldview, and the fact that that to be free, we have to have the gods of Africa on our side. And to be free from mental enslavement, then we must embrace the spirituality and worldview of Africa, which emanates from its spirituality. So that is saying a whole mouthful. That, for me, is where I locate James. So that is first. And then his putting cricket especially beyond the boundary says it all. The understanding that cricket was not just a sport, but represented that tussle between colonized peoples and the colonial masters, and an era in which they could beat them. In one of my own poems on cricket, because I have written on cricket, I talk about men who play at politics and thinks it's cricket. And that is directly out of the Jamesian worldview of cricket. So he has influenced me in that way. And you know, the width and spread of his knowledge. You know, Frantz Fanon, who is the other great ideologue that I recognize, has talked about the freedom fighter, if you will. That's not the word he's used, but I don't remember it at the moment. The person who is involved in freedom for the people, the artist, the intellectual, sometimes gets bogged down in the past, and sometimes also forgets that culture is a constantly changing ethos. And for me, James represented that in the width of his mind, the width of his vision. I've been able to sit at his feet and hear him go from Dostoevsky to Zola to Baldwin to Neville Shute to, in an amazing span of being able to look at the human condition as exemplified in the words of some of our greatest writers worldwide. And even when I was involved in the maelstrom of the Afrocentric movement in the 70s, I never gave up the claim of my humanity to everything that has emanated from mankind.
How would you respond to that critique of James that, well, despite the recognition that voodoo was a medium of that revolution, that he did not give it as much importance as some people would today perhaps have given it? Is it because at that time he was writing in the 30s, voodoo was seen really as backward, and therefore he was trying to link the revolution with progressive forces, the Jacobins in France?
I think he was a materialist. Yes. I don't feel that he had any belief in African spirituality or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But he just recognized that that is what it was, and he just stated the historical fact. Mm-hmm. For me, who was searching and involved in revolution, it jumped out at me, because that is what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it cemented the view that I came to have, that it's impossible to be Africanist and Christian. Mm-hmm.
Possible. But Christ was an African.
Huh?
Christ was an African.
In this here time.
Yes, okay.
In this here time. I mean, but who recognizes Christ as an African?
Okay.
Representation is reality. He is depicted as this blonde white man. That is what...
Misrepresentation.
You know, I don't care if it's misrepresented. That is how everybody believes him, and I feel that the scourge of Africa right now is Christianity.
Yes, the fundamentalist Christianity.
The scourge of the motherland is Christianity. You know, I think it's reprehensible how wholesale, you know, the Bible has been absorbed. And what is even more, for me, ridiculous is the dichotomy between the wide-scale corruption and the wide-scale Christianity, a kind of corruption which could not exist under the morals of traditional African religion and the sage for Iwakele. But I am going off course.
Maybe not. So in your poetry, you're bringing out the spirituality that James encouraged you to develop?
James did not encourage me to develop spirituality. Okay. That's not what I said.
Okay.
You know, in James, I saw the role that spirituality played in the revolution. And as a revolutionary, to me it represented what was lacking from my own revolution. Mm-hmm.
That's
and made it
interesting.
clear.
Very interesting point. And that's the point that Kwame Ture made over and over again. That Marxism failed to mobilize Africans because Marxists will go and tell them that religion is an opium, whereas Africans know that they could not have survived what they survived without a strong faith in the ancestors, a strong faith in somebody upstairs, and a strong faith in an afterlife. But that was part of the reason Africans survived the Holocaust. But then Marxists would go there to dismiss all this, and so Africans would say, no, we're not coming with you if that's the case.
So the breadth of I admired him tremendously for the breadth of his vision, his scholarship, his intellect, and the fact that despite all of that, he rejected formal tertiary education. And that for me is an important point. So I had that wonderful relationship with him and beautiful letters from him and encouragement to put the play on. And of course his very presence at the play, which is one of the highest points of my career as an artist. And I remember afterwards, me and Darkus Howe were always at loggerheads.
Yes.
Darkus, there's David Abdullah,
Yes.
there's Earl Lovelace, there's Eintou, there's Darkus Howe.
Yes.
The production is finished, it's been very successful. And James is reclining regally with his students, all of us around him. And Darkus is attacking me as usual. He says, Eintou, that play is a distortion of James. You brought your postmodern feminist view into the thing, and you created a morals that is not true too. So of course, he's on one side of the bed, I'm on the other side. Nello is in the middle.
Okay.
And I'm saying you're out of order. As writer, as director, it is my prerogative to create who I want, who I see.
Your interpretation. Yes.
When we put on Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar is clothed in a dashiki with sandals.
Yes.
Who objects? Does Shakespeare turn in his grave?
No.
You know, the longevity, the relevance, the immortality of a work resides in its ability to influence different generations, and so on. The argument went backward and forward. And then, you know, Nello has held up his hand for quiet. And then this finger that was always, the child is right, Darkus. He called me the child up till the day he died. You know, because he used to look at me among all these men, these big radical intellectual men. I always arguing with them. I'm little and most of them big. And he said, the child is right, Darkus. Leave her alone. The immortality of a work depends on how different generations do it and so on. And he began to talk about Dostoevsky and Zola and Baldwin and Guy de Maupassant, you know, and it was a wonderful, wonderful occasion.
Yeah. I did talk about that work with Darkus in London. I saw him over the summer. And one thing that struck me is something you referred to here, that James rejected tertiary education. And I was thinking whether the fact that immediately the leading character left his inheritance and went to room with the common people, that was a metaphor for James, that he has got a good education from Queen's Royal College. There's no way for him to throw that away. The way the guy could not have given away his inherited house, he simply rented it out and went to room with the ordinary people.
But my disappointment with James was with all the Pan-Africanists that they all went with white women. So, you know, and they get very upset when I say this.
Okay.
I don't care.
Okay, but
that's how I feel.
Yes, but there is also a view that in our struggle against racial oppression, that white women often are some of our strongest allies.
I don't give a damn about that.
No. So what would be your...
I don't. I think it is still grasping the denied, grasping the unattainable.
Okay.
I think it is still to arrive. I object to that.
I'm glad you raised that because it is an issue that I've been wrestling with in Beyond the Boundary. Why did James choose to join the lighter skinned cricket team when he had a choice between the darker and the lighter? He struggled over it, sought advice, but decided to go with the lighter. Why?
I have arrived.
Oh, right. That's the statement.
It seemed to me.
Yes.
It seems to me.
Okay.
And the white woman is still trophy. You know.
But before that, he married a Chinese woman. Is that the same kind of statement?
Same kind. Same. As you say in Koyo, remember like a lot.
Then he went on to explain the Caribbean culture and gave a lot of credit to cricket as part of what civilized the Caribbean to be forgiving, to be not bragging, but to give credit to even the losing team in a cricket match. But I would have thought that is an African tradition rather than a tradition that was introduced by Britain as part of the civilizing process through cricket.
Well, let's face it, James was not an African. He did not have he would see himself, I think, maybe as a Renaissance man, an intellectual, and that is what he was. And that is what he was, and we don't deny that. But for me, he's one of the greatest minds that we have produced, and that is so. Just before he died, couple years, I was in England and he loved his rum, so I took him some rum. I tried to get to see him. Darkest would not permit me to see him. And I had to get the white woman secretary, Anna Goodenshaw, to sneak me in an evening after everybody had left. And when I went upstairs and I saw him lying down there on the bed, so frail, I started to cry. And he said, what you crying for, child?
He knew it was you.
Yes. And he said, you're crying about the library. You know, because at the time I was running the Heritage Library. He said, and then he started to talk to me about the role of the library and what I was doing in the library and so on. You know, and questioning me very intently.
The National Library?
Yes. And he says, you know, don't cry. I will write Robinson and let him deal with this matter, you know, because they don't understand how important our heritage is and documenting the library and, you know, and we told. But I really wasn't crying about the library. I was crying about him there, alone in this room, you know. And those of us who loved him and were students denied access to him by darkers. And then he told me that he would be interested in coming back home, you know, if something could be arranged. And I came back. I tried to talk to Robinson. I talked to various people in the hierarchy of government, and all they made were promises. And even for pension, you know, he had asked for that. And so, by the time they were twiddling their thumbs, he died. And I wanted to spit on all of them at the funeral. You know, I think it's a great source of shame.
Yes. So, in your view, James would have made a lot more achievement if he had stayed in Trinidad to struggle with the people to help build a society, build a better society, rather than going to live in London? Do you think so?
Well, I don't know. I can't say that James is who he was.
Yes.
With all his... I mean, he was a child of Eurocentric education. And to me, consequence of Eurocentric ideals. I mean, his flirtation with Marxism and Leninism and all of that. His searching Trotskyitism or whatever. All had the hallmarks of somebody who, to my mind, was not rooted in this place, in this Caribbean, you know, who had the grandeur and vision of international intellect. But I don't know that he was really rooted here. I mean, maybe this place was too big, was too small for him, for the largeness of his intellect. I don't know. Although I think one place, especially if that is one's place, is as big as a universe if you want to explore it fully. But, you know, he has left us so much, so much. Any cook can govern the federation, you know, and every time I go in, I find something. And I remember his words, I remember his encouragement, I remember his mentorship. You know, I wish I had it more, but certainly what I had, I treasure. What I had was important for me. And I'm very grateful that I was so tutored.
Yes. That's interesting that you mentioned any cook can govern as one of his contributions to political sociology, that it's not just people with university education who should aspire to leadership, but the example he was using to illustrate it, the example of Athenian democracy, which is or was not a democracy because it was a slave society,
precisely,
as James recognized, in which women were not citizens and were not allowed to participate in leadership positions. Why did he choose Athens as an illustration for people of African descent?
But it's exactly what I was just saying.
Yes.
He's not an Africanist. He's not rooted in, you know, he would like to think of himself as part of the Greco-Roman civilized Renaissance man, you know, and therefore he would not have looked to Africa, to Egypt.
And democratic traditions. Yeah.
So,
interesting. I think the same line of thought went into his work on American civilization. He did criticize the racism in America, but he did celebrate America way beyond what many Africans would be comfortable with, given the records of America, especially in the past, but even more so in the present. At the time he was writing, this is a country that threw you out, didn't want you to stay, and still he found the courage, intellectual courage, to say, yes, despite all that, the ordinary American people have made a contribution to civilization that we should recognize. I admire him for that he can criticize something but still recognize
power of intellect.
Yes, what is positive about what is critique. You know. Interesting.
So let me just...
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is for Nello, my tutor. The child of blackness, tutored in self-hate, self-rejection, gropes beyond these boundaries, seeking the light of self-knowledge, seeking new parameters, new definitions for self-affirmation. Ink dots of light have flowed from your pen for decades, loved mentor. Those dots of light have pointed a path of consciousness. Want to wait until it's gone? The child of blackness, tutored in self-hate, self-rejection, gropes beyond these boundaries, seeking the light of self-knowledge, seeking new parameters, new definitions for self-affirmation. Ink dots of light have flowed from your pen for decades, beloved mentor. Those dots of light have pointed a path to consciousness, a path crisscrossing my past, my present, pointing towards my future, a path crisscrossing countries and many centuries. And from your tongue, echoed by your fingers, stabbing the air in pointed emphasis, have come for me and for generations an encouragement to purposeful encounter with self and then all else. Tutored by you, my thirst for knowledge can know no slaking, can suffer no boundaries. Your legacy of 1,000,000 lights stabbing the darkness of self-negation never will go out.